Well, why don't we get started? I think we'll start with the movie. I guess it's not a movie. I guess we're talking semantics here, but it's technically not a movie. I recommended an episode of Columbo, just because I don't think enough people outside of my weird little niche social circle on social media are really respect Columbo as much as I do. Which is, I'm not trying to say that I'm the paragon of Columbo or anything, but I really love to talk about this show because it's a really interesting little piece of TV culture. The episode we chose was, I want to say it was episode 6, Suitable for Framing, which is my favorite first season episode of Columbo by far. You've never seen an episode.
Have you seen all of Columbo?
I haven't seen all of it. I still have a couple seasons left, but I've watched the majority of it. It's just one of those things where I watch it whenever I'm feeling down. It makes me Peter Falk as Columbo puts a smile on my face, and it's really one of those comfort shows for me. You said you've never watched this show before. What did you think of this? You had no idea what you were going into.
Yeah, it was actually kind of funny, though. I do want to bring up is that when we were in PEI, or when I was in PEI and I was hanging out at your place, we watched Wings of Desire, and in that movie, Peter Falk is in it, and he plays himself, a fictionalized version of himself, I guess. And the whole thing is that there are people in that movie that recognize him as Columbo. And so they're like, hey, it's Columbo. And so that was kind of a funny thing because I think you recommended this before we even saw that movie or even knew Peter Falk was going to be in it, much less playing himself. Yeah. But this was like a thing where I had heard the name Columbo before. I didn't know anything about the show. I didn't know what it was about. Like, I assumed it was some kind of mystery show, which it is. But watching this, it was kind of an interesting thing because for this episode, Columbo doesn't show up until like 14 minutes in or something like that. And so the entire first 14 minutes of the show, which, by the way, these episodes are like an hour and 15 minutes long, so that's a good like fifth of the Columbo program.
Yeah.
The entire first 14 minutes are them showing exactly what happened in terms of the crime and who did it and, everything like that. So I kind of went into this thinking it was going to be like a whodunit kind of mystery show. And it is, I guess, from the point of Columbo because he is trying to figure that out. But the whole thing is like, it's a whodunit where they show you who done it at the very beginning.
Yeah.
So I was kind of like, oh, okay, is this going to like alleviate the mystery? I mean, I was intrigued by that because maybe I've seen that before, but this was like a case where like, okay, so every week they show you the crime and then it's Columbo trying to figure out what the audience kind of already knows. And is that kind of accurate for the rest of the series? Like they do kind of show you the crime before Columbo like investigates?
Yeah, so basically the opening of this episode is pretty typical for most episodes of Columbo. I know that there are a notable few cases where it's like a regular whodunit mystery. But for the most part, I believe that the community calls it a how catch 'em, where they it's just the inverse of a whodunit. So you are basically given the killer, how they committed the murder, the entire process of setting up their alibi. Usually, narratively, it sets up their motive, who their accomplices were. Like literally everything you would find out at the end of a whodunit is presented at the beginning of an episode of Columbo, and then enters the titular detective and. The real mystery is how this person can solve a crime that we have just seen is what the writers want to assume we will think is like a perfect crime, like the framing the right person and planting evidence and setting up an alibi, and and the narrative does want you to think that, and then by the end we find out that Columbo has been like 2 steps, 3 steps ahead of them the entire time, because that's the real charm of this show is Peter Falk. Because in any other police show like this, where you had the gruff police detective looking into the mystery, if you had any sort of whodunit protagonist or detective in the place of Columbo, I don't think the show would have any sort of like suspense or entertainment value, because Columbo is not the typical protagonist. He's very much like he's bumbling, and he'll bump into things, and he'll make mistakes, but you sort of get this idea that he knows way more than he lets on, which is, as you find out from watching the show, definitely the case, because he's this genius detective. But to the criminal, he is just someone who is annoying them and pestering them with unnecessary details that's keeping them from actually getting away with their crime. And I think the whole dichotomy of having a character like that be your protagonist is like the biggest draw in this show, is having this incredibly likable and down-to-earth character be your main driving force of the narrative.
Yeah, what I found kind of interesting is that whenever you watch the show, or at least whenever I watched this particular episode, if I didn't know that Columbo was a series, and I thought this was just an individual movie, I would kind of think that the person committing the crime is the protagonist, because what we do see is like everything from his perspective. We see like how he did it, how he's trying to get away with it, how he's setting up other people to be framed, and then with Columbo, he's the one who we don't really get all the information out of in terms of what he knows, what he's onto. I mean, he's pretty like open about a lot of it when he's talking to the person who who he suspects and is correct in suspecting. But the whole thing about it is like, you could almost consider Columbo to be the foil to the protagonist in this episode, and I'm assuming most episodes. So it's like, It's kind of like, it's interesting because you could see, the way I kind of viewed this show is that every episode there's a new protagonist, but the foil to that protagonist is always the same person, because we're seeing it from the perspective of the person who's not the title character, which I found was a really interesting way of going about it.
Yeah, you're honestly right. Yeah, like there's a hard line between protagonist and hero in this case.
Yeah,
I think that Columbo is definitely, in every episode of Columbo, is our hero.
Yeah,
he's the person who's going to catch the criminal and all that. But our protagonist is the criminal themselves, because almost every part of the show is following that character. I do know that in later seasons we get a lot more time with Columbo himself, but still, going through the whole series, most of the time what you are seeing is the day-to-day life of this criminal trying to get away with their crime being interrupted by Columbo in these really irritating and grating ways. Like, he's trying to get digs at them by the way of acting incompetent. In this episode specifically, we have an art critic killing his uncle to inherit his entire art collection, and he's an amazing actor. Unfortunately the name is escaping me, but he is in multiple Columbo episodes as multiple different criminals. Actually, that's how good he is, and that's how well he plays this sort of role. And he comes off as very arrogant, very high class. You see him attend these art galleries and hit down at the lowly artists when he criticizes their work. It's very much like, and this is true for most episodes of this show, it's very much like they represent almost a higher class, because Columbo himself is a lower to middle class person, not someone you would associate with the people that he's taking down. Investment lawyers, art critics, high-ranking members of the military, famous photographers, celebrities, actresses, directors. One of the other best episodes involves the murderer being a maestro, a conductor of an orchestra. All of these high places of society, and meanwhile Columbo, someone who you don't really see as threatening because he plays the fool, is really the one who holds these people's lives in their palm. And I think that's a really cool way of doing it, and it's a really empowering thing, because he feels so safe and friendly at all points, even to the murderer, because that's his main motive. Is every scene you'll see him in, he approaches this art critic and he's like, I'm such a big fan, and I just think you're so amazing, and you look at all this art, and I don't know how to make heads or tails of it. I'm just a little guy, and but every once in a while he makes one of these observations where it's like, okay, well, maybe he knows a lot more than he maybe acts like he knows.
Yeah.
It's such an interesting way to present a character like this.
Yeah, and with Peter Falk, he gives so many nuances in this story. He's very good at both the surface level stuff, where, he's kind of being awkward and, being a little bit, he kind of just seems like an awkward guy with a little bit of insight. But then as you get more into it, I just love the contrast between him, the kind of, I don't want to say it's a face that he puts on, because I actually do believe that's how the character is.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but, it is kind of the dichotomy between the sort of casual way that he just kind of is to how much insight that he has. And I can kind of see why people would gravitate towards something like that in a show like this. So I was, as somebody who hasn't seen the series before, I was very impressed by this episode. I would watch another episode and probably a few. I don't know if I'd watch all 67 or whatever, but maybe I would. I don't know if I'm ready to make that commitment yet, but I was impressed by what I saw. And apparently the show ran from 1968 to 2003, which is insane.
Yeah, so it ran all through the 70s, and then I believe it ended for a short period of time before coming back again in the 80s. And then there was a couple of shorter seasons that came out in the 90s and 2000s, before Peter Falk passed away, unfortunately. And through all of it, he just sort of embodies this character. And I think you're right. He comes off as someone with a bit of insight, but as a person, as you'll see in later episodes, if you choose to watch this show any farther, we see a lot of scenes with him outside of dealing with the suspect and outside of dealing with the case. And a lot of these scenes really paint him as, this isn't a face, this isn't an act, this is who he is. And the fact that that's who he is, sort of, he uses that to his own advantage. He uses his people's preconceptions of him and his standard of living and his standard of his place in society, and he uses that against them to make the murderers let their guard down. And it's such an interesting way to put that. And I've never been a big fan of these mystery shows. It was always sort of a basic format for me, but this change in the character and the perspective was just enough to get me just completely hooked.
Yeah, it is very character based, and I don't watch a whole lot of mystery shows. I do like a good whodunit movie or something, the freaking damn it. Why am I blanking on the name? The one with Daniel Craig. Sequel is called Glass Onion.
Oh yes, Knives Out.
Yes, like that, or the 70s Murder on the Orient Express. I haven't seen the Kenneth Branagh version, which I've heard is boring. But I do like a good mystery show, or a good mystery story, I should say. But I prefer things that are more character based, I would say.
Yeah.
In terms of just what I personally get out of art in general. So I do kind of like this, this sort of twist on the formula. And again, I'm not sure if it's the first show that's done it, or the first whatever that's done it. But I did think that the way that they did it was very impressive, and I can see why people like this character so much, and I can see why it has gotten a cult following even to this day, even though I personally didn't really hear many people talking about it. But from what you're saying, it sounds like it does have a little bit of a dedicated cult following.
Yeah, for sure. There is, again, as I said in the last episode, I'm still active on Tumblr, and actually this has taken off for like 14 to late 20s, that demographic. They really dig this character and how soft and not like other cop shows he is. He's just like, he's like a big teddy bear to these people. And I get why. He's very inviting, even to the murderers in these cases. He almost wants you to let your guard down. And you almost want to let your guard down when he's talking, because he's just so friendly. And he very rarely gets angry. I think that there's the official Columbo YouTube channel has a compilation of every time he's gotten actually angry in an episode, and it's about 9 minutes out of all like 67 episodes. But when he does get angry like that, it's a very momentous thing. But any time other than that, he is just a very relatable and lovable guy, and it makes me happy to watch this.
Yeah, I mean, it does a really good job at like towing the line between, there are some scenes that are intense, there are some scenes I even found shocking, like when he kills his lover on the road.
Yeah.
In this episode. Yeah, which I guess spoilers, but I figured that this is kind of a deep cut.
Yeah.
Anyway, but yeah, this is like, there's a definite mix between comedic tone and sort of dark and serious tone.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
I really liked the way that they did it, because it's not just like, oh, one scene's dark and one scene's comedic. It's like it can change drastically from the beginning of a scene to the end of a scene, and then even revert back to what it was originally.
Yeah, so. The most famous, I guess, meme from this show is Columbo, coming into a scene and saying something innocuous, but then there's just one more thing, and then the music stings and the tone changes once he reveals this amazing piece of information that he'd been sitting on the whole time.
Yeah, I read that was like a catchphrase of him.
Yeah.
That was like, that they use a lot in the show.
Yes, absolutely. I would say I've watched about 6 seasons. I want 5 or 6 seasons of Columbo, and I'll say they don't. It's not like a Flanderization. It's not like, it's not like, say the line, Columbo. It's very much, it never feels forced, is the thing. It's just one of these tools that he has in his Columbo Batman belt that he uses whenever he's investigating these things. And it feels so natural for this character to even have a catchphrase. Even though catchphrases are, I would say, something that take me out a little bit of, like, it's just like, you're talking to me right now. But it never feels like that. And I think that's really great. Yeah.
I mean, it depends on how catchphrases are used.
Yeah.
And in a situation like this, where it feels natural with the dialogue, it's kind of like, say, it's like when Spock says, like, fascinating or logical.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't feel out of place, like he's just, like, mugging to the camera or something when he's saying that. And that's what I feel about Columbo, where it's just like, okay, yeah, he says that a lot, but it probably just feels natural. I mean, I can't really, I guess, comment, because I haven't seen more than this episode yet, and I didn't do a whole lot of research on it, because I wanted to kind of go into this podcast a little bit blind when it came to Columbo, as opposed to you, who knows a lot about it. But yeah, from my perspective, very impressed.
Yeah.
So
it's funny you mentioned Spock, because there's another really amazing episode with Leonard Nimoy playing a surgeon who's murdered somebody. And on that note, there's also an episode where William Shatner is the murderer. There's a lot of great guest stars. There was Dick Van Dyke. One of the more notable ones was Johnny Cash played the murderer in one episode, where he plays basically a fictionalized version of himself with a different name. I would definitely, again, all of those episodes, I would 100% recommend.
Cashy John.
But, yeah... I love Columbo, and I guess we should probably talk about my favorite moment in this episode before we get too far and start on the swimmer. Columbo is on the heels of this murder as he's trying to cover up his murder of his uncle. He tries to pin the murder on his aunt, who had divorced his uncle, and there's this great moment where they find the stolen paintings that had been taken from the scene in her linen closet, and she's flabbergasted and can't imagine how this could have happened. And Columbo asks them to dust the painting for fingerprints, and says that he knows that this art critic is the murderer, and he blows up and says it's outrageous, and then he says that I'm the one who brought those paintings in. My fingerprints are all over them. And he goes, oh yeah, I know. But I touched them when you were moving them, when I fell asleep at your house. And there's this moment where he's at a loss for words. And he says, Columbo, there's no way that could be the case. He must have put his fingerprints on the painting right now. And then there's this great shot where Columbo takes his hands out of his pockets where they've been the whole scene, and he's got wool gloves on to prevent himself from leaving fingerprints, and hard cut to credits. And Columbo is great at that, at a great end stinger, just like that. Incredible.
Yeah, I also love that it ended right there. And it didn't end with him going to get incarcerated and having this big scene. It's oh well, what did we learn from all this?
Yeah.
So, those type of cliches that you see in cop shows or whatever. And is that kind of par for the course with the other Columbo episodes?
Yes, for sure. Yeah, every episode usually ends with the big reveal and the big accusation, and the most we'll get is maybe him then being led off of the scene while Columbo solemnly smokes his cigar, and it's it almost makes him feel like mythic, like Bigfoot or something, and I think that's really awesome.
It actually kind of reminded me of. Have you ever seen the movie Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3, the 70s one?
I don't think I have.
Okay, yeah, I watched that kind of last year, and it has probably, I won't give it away, but it has one of my favorite endings in any movie ever, the final shot. Wow. And that's what the ending of Columbo kind of reminded me of. Again, not getting into too specifics, but yeah, I would just say I really recommend that movie, and the ending is my favorite part of that movie. And yeah, I'd say that the ending was definitely... It was either that scene or the scene where he killed his lover on the road, just because of how shocking it was. Those were probably my two favorite scenes in the episode.
Oh, yeah. And I want to say, I don't know if this episode's the best example of that, but Columbo also has a lot of great artistic cinematography. Most of these opening shots establishing the murderer and their crime and how they set up their alibi are usually shot in a really interesting artistic way. In this episode, it's mostly focusing on the art on the walls, almost like watching him and judging him, and that's par for the course as well for Columbo, is this really interesting cinematography. And I think that there's a little bit for everyone in this show. It's one of those shows that I never expected to get into, because it's my mom remembered when these shows were coming on. She would always say oh, that's lame. Columbo was lame. Columbo was lame back in the day, and it's Columbo's getting his renaissance now. And as usually with things like that, I find that I've watched multiple different anime that have referenced Columbo, and I've found out that there's I think a statue of Columbo in, I want to say, Hungary. For some reason that is not really explained. Okay. He was very much like an international icon, to the point where I believe there is a show called The Japanese Columbo, where it's basically the same show except it's in Japan and a Japanese It was, and which is really cool. I would love to check that out.
Yeah, it seems like the Japanese really like their mystery
for
shows, because it's I know what's the Detective Conan?
Yeah.
Is that his name?
Yeah, exactly.
There's that, and then there's Lupin the Third and all that stuff, so
yeah.
It seems to be a very popular genre there. And then all the even movies like High and Low or other Kurosawa movies are definitely more geared towards that. But anyway, I'm getting a little bit off topic.
Yeah.
It was kind of funny that you bring that up because it's like you're thinking like, oh, it'll be kind of old and outdated. And I kind of have that reaction for a lot of old TV.
Yeah.
But the thing is, I find that the further back that I go, I actually find that a lot of the shows age better. I think I Love Lucy ages a lot better than Different Strokes, for example.
Oh yeah.
So it's just like, like, or like even The Twilight Zone, which is one of my favorite shows of all time, and like that was a very, very early TV show. So it's like, it's weird with television because so much of it was produced just like in mass quantity to have something that you would watch on like the 3 channels that you would have back then. But then sometimes you get something really like artistic and deep like The Twilight Zone or Columbo. And it's like, yeah, there are a lot of like gems in that sort of era, which is, something that I think that I maybe should explore more, because I don't have this reaction with like old video games or old movies even. It's pretty much just old TV where I'm like, yeah, I don't know if I want to get into that.
Yeah. No, that's for sure. And this isn't usually my wheelhouse. I don't usually watch TV from this era, but maybe I should, because this is just really good. And one last thing I wanted to say about Columbo before we move on is the music in these episodes is so incredibly good.
I was going to bring that up.
It's some of the best TV music I've ever heard. It's just so incredibly atmospheric, and it's incredible.
Do they do a different score for each time, or is it pretty much the same music cues and stuff like that?
No, usually there's. I guess I would have to double check, but it all sort of follows the same sort of theme, but music cues sort of change episode by episode, which is I really appreciate that.
Yeah, and I would say it's interesting too, because like when you bring up like the technical aspects of it, you can sort of tell that this was filmed for TV, in the sense that the shots are kind of tighter than what you'd see in a movie, at least with interior shots, and stuff like that. But within that realm, like there's a lot of, you could say it's more limiting, but a lot of art thrives on limitations.
Exactly.
So the fact that they were able to make this show look that good really shows that it's really a artistic choice that they went with and really worked. And with like the tight shots, it does kind of lend itself better to the story, because you can kind of feel the tightness of the murderer. I guess his name was Dale in this case. You can kind of feel the tightness of Dale, like when he realizes that, okay, things are kind of bubbling to the surface. He might be in a little bit of a trouble here. I really do kind of like the aesthetic. I think it actually might work better for this format than if they did it for a movie.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And I think you said exactly what I would say, is that it thrives in this format. I think that it would be maybe a little overproduced if it was made to release theatrically. I think it thrives in the format that it's in.
Yeah, but with that saying, like, I do think this is good to watch like on a big television, so you can just notice like all the art, like paintings in the background and all the little things like that, because the sets are really beautiful too.
Yeah, for sure.
That's another thing that I want to point out, is that the set design in this is really, really good. And I guess, I don't know if the costuming is just like standard 70s costuming, but like I said with Columbo, like the way that he kind of like presents himself, it's very, very interesting. Yeah. And I also love how he's always carrying around a cigar, which from my understanding is like a pretty common thing in these episodes. So
I love Columbo, and I there's no guarantee that I might not bring it up again because I still have more episodes to watch. I might come up with one that really tickles my fancy. But I think that
I would be down for more Columbo episodes. It's kind of like when I was watching Sherlock, because the Sherlock is made for TV, but you could definitely see like it feels more theatrical than your sort of normal TV show, and it feels more like the content is like a movie. And Columbo kind of is the same boat, because it's not like a half hour or even just an hour. It's like feature length. Or, well, a short feature, but a feature nonetheless.
Yeah. So So I think that's about all I have to say about Columbo, unless you have anything else you wanted to add.
For suitable for framing, anyway.
Yeah, for suitable for framing. I could talk a lot about just Columbo in general, but for this episode, I think that's everything.
Yeah, exactly. And I would recommend, as somebody who hasn't seen the rest of the series, this was a pretty good tipping off point. I mean, I don't know, maybe Columbo is like really good out of the gate from the pilot, since this was one of the early episodes, so I don't know if you'd recommend people just start from the beginning and go from there, or...
Actually, the pilot episode was, I believe, I can't remember if it was written or directed by Steven Spielberg. So, yeah, I would say start with the pilot and just go from there. Yeah.
Oh, my.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. No,
wow.
there was...
That would have been before Duel.
Oh, yeah.
Like, that would have been before his first movie.
Yeah. Yeah, for real. And it's an amazing episode, too. I just think there was a little less going on than in this one.
Yeah, I definitely... Duel is another one I want to talk about one day, because I don't think you've seen that. But
no, I haven't. I think we talked about
Spielberg's first, and in my opinion, one of his best. Yeah, because like I compared it to The Hitcher, and it is similar to The Hitcher, but it's also its own thing. But anyway, I don't want to drag this out too long about talking about other stuff. So yeah, Columbo, suitable for framing. Highly recommend it. I would check out more Columbo. Yes. It's kind of interesting because it's like he has 67 episodes. He's solved more crimes than James Bond at this point.
Solved more crimes probably than most LAPD police officers.
Yeah, that's very true. This was good stuff.
Yeah.
Nothing but praise for Columbo.
But
so far.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure there's like a bad episode here or there or something like that, but I'm sure that there's the majority of them are probably good.
I mentioned that sometimes it goes into a normal whodunit scenario, and in the episode where they do that, that's probably one of the worst episodes I've seen. They just really wanted to do something more standard, and it totally messed up the formula. I don't know why.
I gotta wonder how they pitched this show too. That was another thing I put in my notes. Is like, how do you like go to a thing? It's like, okay, we're gonna do this show that's like somebody solving a crime, but the crime is gonna be solved to the audience before we even start with the detective going for it. So I don't know, but it worked. I mean,
yeah.
I don't know how you pitch that, but I'm glad that it got picked up.
Yeah, me too.